Welcome everyone to today's digital masterclass, the first of the series from us here at Equimedia. And today we're talking about effective digital marketing in the age of privacy. So this is just a 30-minute session today to talk strategically about how we can get prepared and to start taking action now really in what is an increasing age of privacy that actually opens up lots of really exciting opportunities from a digital perspective. So a lot to cover off in a short space of time, and here's a summary of what we plan to go over. Obviously, we're going to talk about what are our clients asking us? There's lots of questions we're being asked, and we hope to at least answer those at a high level. How will businesses be impacted by third-party cookies being phased out? How can you prepare? And as part of that, obviously the 6-month roadmap to set you up for success it's a framework that we just pulled together for the purposes of today's presentation. So you can actually see what you can start to test and learn now, and forward planning and forward thinking. And we get to the end of the presentation, there's a nice 10-point checklist to take away and review with your team. So let's crack on. So what are our clients asking us? And there's obviously understandable unease about the cookieless future, and as it approaches, there's lots to think about. We've got clients asking us that they're worried about their website reporting. Is it going to change? Is it going to become less accurate? Simple things of what is first-party data and how can I collect it? Will my results change? How should I adopt my priorities for brand building? Is that going to be more important as more first-party data collection becomes essential, really? Do I need to invest in new tools and new tech? How do you best utilize first-party data to get the most, not just out of your marketing activity, but also within your CRM? And how will my business be impacted by third-party cookies going away, which is the big question. And we hope to answer some of those today. Now, according to Google, by this time next year, and that is ever approaching, obviously, third-party cookies will be phased out. What you can see on the right in this graph, and there's a link at the bottom of this slide as well off to Google's privacy sandbox, which we'll come on to a little bit later. But fundamentally, by Q4 this year, you're going to be able to opt in to testing in the privacy sandbox, and by Q3 next year, third-party cookies will be phased out, and that's going to start, apparently, according to Google, by a 1% depreciation in third-party cookies in Q1, and that is quite a big change. Or at least it seems like quite a big change, but it's worth remembering that even in a cookieless world, consent and cookie consent is going to become or continue to remain an essential lawful basis for consent, really. So you're still going to have customization cookies, all essential cookies, and it's worth remembering that third-party cookies haven't existed on Firefox or Safari or Edge or Brave or many other browsers for quite a while. But the reason why this is such a big deal is Chrome accounts for 75% of all website browsing. So that's going to have quite a significant effect on both consumers and on advertisers as well. Now, from a consumer perspective, they'll probably experience very few noticeable changes. People may, however, notice ads become slightly less specific to their interests, and depending on your perspective, that might be a positive thing. From our perspective, it's going to make it harder for brands to track and target specific browsing behaviors. And off the back of that, businesses, agencies are going to have to find alternate ways to gather and utilize browsing habits, both to track your essential metrics, but also to use that for ongoing marketing and retargeting. So we need to shift away from that cookie or third-party cookie-based approach to more first-party data-led strategies, and the sooner the better, really, in terms of testing those strategies. And that's what we're aiming to help you with today, to build up a really strong foundation. And then you have a data foundation from a first-party perspective to start informing both the way you're reporting and measuring success, and also how you're reaching your consumers at the right time in the right place. This is a statement we've got that I think is a really good starting place, and it's kind of a challenge statement, I guess. So replace third-party cookies with first-party cookies and zero-party data, alternate engagement strategies, and an easy-to-implement consent management system. Sounds really easy, right? But there's obviously a lot that sits within this, and we'll go into that now. And the next slide is into a 6-month roadmap. Now I'm going to flash quite a lot of things on screen now, and we'll dive into each of these individually in more detail. And hopefully, those of you that are watching this video, you'll be able to say, oh, we've already done those things, or you'd like to learn more about these other elements that are coming up in the future. So the first one is something that I won't dwell on because You would have all heard about this for probably the last 6 months, and obviously GA4 needs to be set up optimally. We've got lots of videos and content out there if you need help with GA4 still, but GA4 is going to be a really central first-party data source, both for reporting, but also to inform your targeting strategies and your consumer reaching strategies moving forward. So make sure you have GA4 set up optimally is a really important basis. Cookie consent banners. Cookie consent banners are obviously a very important part of both your GDPR infrastructure, but most importantly, your consent structure. And you want to be filling GA4 and filling your first-party cookie and first-party data pools as much as possible. And cookie consent really drives that. We've seen some clients that have had drop-offs in cookie consent, and as a result, they're not collecting as much first-party data. And you really want to get your first-party data management and your first-party data capture up, and we can talk through a few strategies for that. There are other tools out there now, like Google Consent Mode, to help improve conversion modeling. So, for example, if you've got an 80% opt-in rate to your cookie banner, you can still model those 20% of unconsented conversions into Google Analytics and into AdWords as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but those first three things really are a fundamental basis to ensure you're collecting, or firstly, you're storing your GA4 and first-party data optimally. You're getting lots of it, and you're increasing your opt-ins and collecting more first-party data. And where you're not collecting those consents, you're at least modeling that behavior with the AI and machine learning. You have to be doing those things at least to start with. You also want to make sure you're running your ads via PMax or Discovery, build up those learnings and utilize those new targeting strategies. There was one actually released very recently, which we'll talk about shortly, but I imagine everyone on this call should be utilizing either PMax or Discovery ads within the Google Ads setup. That's something, if you're not doing, it's time to get started, that's for sure. There are also lots of great customer match strategies out there. And when I say customer match strategies, that means taking your CRM data, your zero-party data really, and creating lookalike audiences off the back of that. That's going to become way more important as we move into a third-party cookieless world and into a first-party data-led targeting world, really. GA4 also offers some really exciting opportunities for both custom audiences that you can create based on your GA4 first-party data that you can then target consumers with, but also predictive AI machine learning-led audiences, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. There are technical things that I think are also very important to get your head around to both improve reporting accuracy, so the success and failure of your campaigns are being measured correctly, but also from a pure data compliance perspective, you're going to want to get your head around server-side tagging. That's likely to become quite an important part of your data and consent strategy in the future. That links in quite nicely with what's known as the walled gardens for targeted advertising, and Facebook Conversion API, or CAPI, is a great example of walled gardens. And as we move away from third-party cookie targeting, you're going to want to really get intimate with all of the first-party data available to you in the walled gardens of Facebook, of TikTok, of GA4. All of that's going to become vitally important as you move forward. And as we move to the end of this year and into the beginning of next year, the Google Privacy Sandbox, assuming it hits its deadlines, it's been pushed back a few times, will release. And the Privacy Sandbox is really, really important because it will be replacing third-party cookies. And that's how you're going to be able to target in a similar-ish way to the way you've been able to do so before. And the last thing on the roadmap is, I guess, a very much a future thinking piece, but you would have heard the talk about data clean rooms like Ads Data Hub that help generate insights that can then both feed into campaigns and improve performance. And these data clean rooms are where you join up your ad data and your first-party data, analyze it, and then you can feed that insight into either reports or into new audiences you create. A lot there, and there's a lot to think about. And hopefully you've already got yourself up to speed with quite a few of these things, but we'll dive into it now. And of course, we'd love to talk to you about any questions you might have. We'll deal with each of these at a fairly high level. So the first, which I won't dwell on for too long, is building your data castle on solid foundations. And I mentioned some of these things already in terms of improving consent and opt-in rates, because you want to gather more first-party data now than you can before. You want to utilize things like consent mode, have a really great data layer implemented so you can get really high value data into GA4 for segmentation reporting and potentially for targeting in the future. BigQuery we've thrown in here because for those of you who have your GA4 profiles set up, if you're not on GA4 360, you will be aware that you've only got 14 months worth of data retention in GA4, which is very different to the old GA3 Universal Analytics, which retained it ad infinitum. So make sure you've firstly got your 14-month data retention box ticked, but also BigQuery set up to retain your really historical data. And then at the top of that castle really is the custom and predictive audiences within GA4. And I'll dive into these slightly more now. Don't be afraid to A/B test your consent banner. Cookie consent banners, as I said at the very start, are very important because you want to be collecting as much of your first-party data as possible in whatever platforms you choose. Google Analytics 4 is the one that everyone will likely have by now, and that's going to be where you're going to start to model some really exciting data. But there are other first-party data sources that you can start to use. So you really want to get your first-party opt-ins as high as they possibly can be. If you're using tools like OneTrust, which is our cookie consent tool of choice, you can A/B test different banner creatives and messages to get your opt-ins as high as physically possible. So might not be quite as sexy or as exciting as other things, but it will be vitally important, and I wouldn't let this slip through the radar. Google consent mode. What is Google consent mode? So if you imagine you go to a website and you click on a cookie consent banner and you consent, you will follow that green trajectory on the left-hand side of this diagram. And that data will be collected as normal in Google Analytics 4, or that conversion will be attributed as usual within Google Ads. If you do not consent, however, of course, you don't consent for that conversion to be tracked. Your analytics data technically should not be tracked if that person does not click accept. So you need to make sure you have alternate options to collect those pings. Google Consent Mode is a great tool because what it does is it's a special setting for Google specific tags that allows pings to be sent to Google when cookies are not set. So if, for example, I visited a site and I did not consent, I would still send a completely anonymized ping to the Google servers, and it would then model the conversion based on that. So it's quite a nice layer and a relatively essential layer for high traffic sites and high traffic businesses to ensure you measure success or failure accurately, especially if your cookie consent is, say, 80% or less. You're potentially missing on reporting on 20 to 25% of your conversions. So have a look at Google Consent Mode. It's not terrifically complicated to implement, so have a chat with your internal team or your agency to make sure that that's something that's been considered. Why is all this stuff important? And although it might not be completely sexy in terms of talking about cookie consent and collecting as much first-party data as possible and modeling that data, actually you want transparency and respect to be at the forefront of your data strategy. And this is a nice quote from Adweek, which is, with consumers increasingly wary about their data, keep consent management and strong data governance in mind as you think of new ways to collect first-party data. If your brand can show that you treat data responsibly and respectfully, prospects will be more willing to share their information with you. And you really do want them to share as much information with you as possible, whether that's first-party data in GA4 or whether it's your zero-party data, so surveys, emails, more information about them as a person, their behaviors, their likes, their dislikes. That zero-party data will also be really valuable. You're more likely to get that if you treat their data with transparency and respect. And we know that unlocks high lifetime value, and we know it can help boost ROI by nearly a factor of 3. And it's very important for the brand. So keep this forefront of your mind. So once we're on that road to success and we've built those solid foundations, if you're not already, and I imagine most of you are, think about adopting AI, machine learning based targeting, and get learning. PMax, Google Performance Max, and Discovery Ads as well. 2 really important channels to test because you want that algorithm to learn about you as a brand and your customers and help inform and refine your targeting as much as possible. There are lots of great visual assets, and for those of you that aren't adopting PMax to the max it can be yet, the inventory you get access to through PMax and Discovery Ads is obviously greater than just in the SERPs. YouTube, display, search, discover, in Gmail, even in Google Maps. it's really worthwhile doing. So make sure you're making the most of this channel. And one of the really exciting things with the likes of PMAX and discovery ads is you need to keep your ear to the ground, because there are new targeting opportunities appearing on a regular basis. So on the 15th of August, it was announced that you need to get ready to upgrade discovery ads to demand gen. It will happen automatically eventually. But this is really the next evolution of discovery ads into new demand gen format. One of the most exciting things about this particular recent change is that it's really rebranding what was Google's similar audiences, i.e. you could take some of your first party and zero party data, so your actual CRM data, and upload it into Google in an anonymized, safe and GDPR compliant way. And it would then create a lookalike audience you can then target. And using the AI and machine learning available in the Google platform, it will create lookalikes of the consumers that you choose to upload. That might be your most likely consumers to buy a specific product, or a list of customers that look like people that are coming up for renewals, for example. So you can use it in a really smart way to create lookalike audiences. And Google did sunset similar audiences last year, and this is really a revitalization of a similar kind of methodology. So lots of exciting changes. Things are happening really fast at the moment as we move towards that first-party data world and away from third-party cookies. So if you haven't already seen this, have a chat with your team, with your agency, and make sure this is something that's been considered. Google Custom Match is also something that you should be considering. The diagram on the left is a simplified way of looking at it, but it's another great way of taking your customer data and creating lookalike audiences, but also excluding people. So you may want to exclude certain types of customers as well from your audience, so you don't waste budget. So keep an eye out for other tools like this, like Customer Match, like other lookalike audiences, like the changes in demand gen, and make sure you're taking your first party, your zero party data, and utilizing it within your ad strategy, and of course in a friendly and compliant fashion. Now, custom audiences and predictive audiences in GA4 is something you should be testing as of now. So it's a relatively new feature, obviously. Google Analytics 4 was only brought into the only option you could use as of the 1st of July this year. And if you do have Google Analytics 4 set up, check out your predictive audience segments. Everyone should have these segments on the left as your standard. And hopefully you now have enough users in order to start actually using predictive audiences and feeding that predictive audience data into your Google Ads, for example, where you can start to retarget users based on active users who are not likely to visit your site in the next 7 days. You can also test things like custom audiences, so actually based on your GA4 data, build custom audiences within GA4, and again, feed that into your Google Ads. Now, GA4 almost becomes its own walled garden. I used that phrase earlier. Its own walled garden to a certain extent, where you can start to build audiences and test them. In all honesty, we've had mixed success with this so far, because the standard audiences in Discovery and within standard Google Ads still work really well. So these haven't worked as well all the time, but you need to bear in mind that you may at some point be forced to use these more. So it's always worthwhile having these on your testing roadmap to make sure that you're at least considering them and learning about it, in case there does become a point where you're forced to use this kind of audience building. And the last one we'd suggest, I guess, on the more customer-facing advertising front is contextual targeting. So here's a really good example we've got here. The audience is people who are looking to move house or who have just purchased a new house. So right now, you might say use some third-party audience examples for your programmatic activity. And that could be these two you can see here around people who are likely to buy a house in the next 12 months or likely home movers. Once third-party cookies are phased out, it is unlikely you're going to have this level of detail, and certainly not these audiences won't exist in the same way. So we would suggest right now testing some alternative contextual targeting methods that will be available when the time comes and third-party cookies start to deprecate. And you want to start testing and optimizing these audiences now, rather than, again, almost starting from scratch when it comes to that point of third-party cookies being deprecated. So in this example, we might create a contextual audience around people that visit some competitor sites, for example. So again, have a chat with your internal team, have a chat with your agency, and just see what other options in terms of contextual targeting you have available to you. We mentioned server-side GTM earlier, and again, this might not be as sexy, but it's actually very important from a data privacy and a accuracy perspective. So you may have heard of server-side GTM, but fundamentally, whereas Google Tag Manager is the standard browser-based version of GTM, server-side GTM is an option that's been around for a year or so now, but it's an advanced version that bypasses ad blockers, it anonymizes data, it enhances conversions, and it then allows you to feed that data into your GA4 or ads tag. So the benefit of this is it's much better from a compliance perspective. It allows for greater visibility of campaign performance. The negative is because whereas the ping is now coming back from a server, it does come at a cost, and it's not a completely uncomplex setup. You will see more server-side tagging options in a second when we talk about Facebook Conversion API, for example. But fundamentally, server-side GTM is something that everyone should start to consider and begin testing, because we have seen really good success for Facebook, for example, or for your Facebook campaigns, to ensure you're both measuring things accurately, but doing it in a compliant fashion within that infrastructure. And again, that's a very whistle-stop tour of quite a complex subject, but server-side GTM is something that, again, I've raised with your internal team or agency to make sure that this is on the roadmap. And with that in mind, you have likely heard about the Facebook Conversion API. This, again, is a server-side tracking option that both it allows you to own that marketing data to optimize ad targeting. It decreases the cost per action, and it allows you to see a more complete picture of campaign outcomes whilst doing it in a very privacy and data compliant fashion. I won't explain this diagram in detail. If you'd like more information on this or any of the other subjects that, of course, require more than just a quick pass by of them, please do let us know. We'd be more than happy to help. But something like the Facebook Conversion API, it can help reduce the average cost per result by, say, 30%, as you can see on screen. So if you are running Facebook activity and you want to try and measure that accuracy, that success in a compliant fashion, but also in a more accurate way, and prove success to help get more budget moving forward, certainly look at the Facebook Conversion API, which works very well. Well, you can only use it with server-side GTM. The privacy sandbox, a huge topic in of itself, and this deserves its own 30-minute webinar, to be honest. And there's lots of great content out there right now on the privacy sandbox and how this is coming down the line, as I said, towards the end of this year and into the beginning of next year. The privacy sandbox, as I said at the start, is Google's response to, well, them deprecating third-party cookies on the Chrome browser. That obviously makes up 70 to 75% of all browsing behavior. And there are different APIs they're creating that will hope to replicate some of the targeting options and data collection options that currently happen within third-party cookies. The ones that you really want to focus on, at least to start with, are the Topics API, which will be replacing third-party audience targeting, the Protected Audience API, or otherwise used to be known as FLEDGE, which is fundamentally your retargeting audiences, and the Attribution API as well is going to become an important one for tracking cross-campaign performance. And the benefit of this is, firstly, it's better compliance with data privacy guidelines, and of course, Google have been through lots and lots of processes with various governments and compliance agencies to make sure that this will do what it needs to do within GDPR and with other data privacy frameworks. So what we'd strongly suggest is, when it comes to third-party cookies being deprecated and the privacy sandbox being rolled out at the end of this year, get testing this API. We're, of course, waiting for more details from Google. There's lots of great documentation and information out there. There's nothing to actually use yet. But once it does become available, it's something you should be considering to create those custom channels and start using Topics API and Protected Audience APIs and other things of that ilk. So one to keep an eye on, and certainly one to put on your longer term roadmap to begin testing. Data clean rooms in of itself is a huge subject that again requires more time, but fundamentally a data clean room is somewhere that allows you to collect log level advertising data, and then it can be queried. So if you imagine you have your Google Ads, your campaign manager data, and your first party data, it allows you to join that data up and measure on its true success and run attribution analysis against your first party data in a privacy friendly way. So it's all completely anonymized. It's all completely safe. It requires quite a lot of manpower and time. So that's something to consider, but it does have better compliance with data privacy guidelines and will be a longer term project for most people. And it's something to get your head around now because there are lots of data clean room options out there. The Ads Data Hub is Google's solution. So do have a think about other solutions that are also available to you. The last thing that we've done in our whistle-stop tour of how to prepare for the third-party cookie-less world and the focus on first-party customer data is the role of CDPs or customer data platforms. So what is a CDP? We've got a little diagram down on the right-hand side that fundamentally shows you how you can collect data, obviously through lots of different means, whether that's demographic, behavioral, transactional, device data, integrate it together and collect it in a unifying first-party data framework from multiple sources to kind of build a single, coherent, complete view of each customer. And that's a definition I got from Oracle, which I think is quite a nice one. But fundamentally, that customer data platform takes all of that first-party data, anonymizes it, matches it based on user IDs, and then you can use things like predictive AI or segmentation by a person to then create bespoke customer journeys and do that kind of more omni-channel marketing off the back of it. Huge bit of kit. There are lots and lots of options out there, and it's certainly become more prevalent over the last 5 years or so. You may already have invested in CDPs, for example. So if you're an Adobe customer and you're using Adobe Experience Manager or Adobe Target, you may well have some of this functionality within that. And there'll be other frameworks within Oracle or within Acquia or other platforms purely dedicated to being CDPs that you can use. So have a look at what technology you have available to you now and think about whether this is something you'd want in the future. So we covered a lot in a 30-minute session, and I appreciate there'll be various bits of this that you may have more interest in than others, and you may want to dive into some of this in more detail. But what we've got is a 10-point checklist to start questioning yourself, questioning your team, questioning your agency, and start thinking about, are we doing all of these things, and is there more we could be doing to get prepared? The first one is maximizing your first-party cookie and cookie opt-ins. The second one is utilize the tools at your disposal, like Google Consent Mode, to improve both quality and quantity of first-party data being collected at the source. That will likely be in GA4, but there'll be other first-party data sources that you have as a business that will be unique to you. Make sure you're adopting those AI and machine learning audience segments now. That's going to become far more prevalent, and it's already pretty prevalent now, and it will become more and more meaningful as we move into that third-party cookieless world. Make sure you're using your actual zero-party first-party customer data with customer match strategies. So uploading anonymized versions of your customer data to create lookalike audiences that you can then target lookalike customers from, and also use it to exclude as well, so you don't have a wasted budget. Those GA4 audiences for targeting are really important. Bear in mind, they're far from perfect yet. GA4 is still a very young product in of itself, so make sure you're testing it, but also ensure you're looking at it in the whole picture of your strategy at the moment. Look at contextual targeting options, as I mentioned earlier, for things like programmatic activity. Embrace those walled gardens. Facebook Cappy's probably the best place to start and the place where most people will start, but there are other walled gardens within platforms like TikTok and others that are worth exploring. Get your head around the privacy sandbox and have a strategy to start testing it. Last two are much bigger topics, but again, certainly something to keep top of mind, which is exploring data clean rooms and looking at things like CDPs for future reference. So I hope you found that useful. There's a lot in there. There's a lot to think about. Yes, there's lots of change, but it's also a really exciting opportunity and one that we as marketers, as data experts, we need to get our heads around and approach it with a positive outlook. And actually, it's a really exciting time to be in digital, to be in marketing, to be in data, because it's a time of great change and a time of great opportunity. So if you do have any questions, please do let us know. We'll be getting in touch with you over the next couple of days just to ask what value you got out of it, what questions you have, and we'd be more than happy to have any follow-up conversations if you'd like to learn more. So thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.